Massachusetts. I got a very special guest today for this Field Trip Friday, I guess, office hours. Instead of doing a Throwback Thursday, we're at a Field Trip Friday. We're taking a field trip to a rail yard at the intersection between Malden, Everett, and Somerville. We were talking to my old friend, Cole Woiszwillo. He's an engineer for the MBTA. Cole, welcome to Office Hours.
Hey, Colin, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. So we were talking a little bit before the interview. You're telling me about what it's like to be an engineer. How long have you been an engineer for the MBTA?
3.5 years for the MBTA, and I worked for a few years on other rail systems before this.
As an engineer working on these rail systems, like, walk us through a day in the life of a rail engineer.
So I deal with the vehicle maintenance. So my day-to-day is verifying vehicles for safety, investigating any sort of incident we may have, and then verifying that the vehicle is safe. I'll review procedures for how to inspect a vehicle, how to repair a vehicle, or develop procedures, and go through those with the training department. Other things we'll do is we'll have to find parts and part replacements online and find sources and vendors and order and replace parts.
And the vendors are the people who sell the parts, right? So they're different vendors that sell the parts from all around the world?
Yeah, different manufacturers and different vendors, and sometimes we'll use local machine shops or companies that make air filters or fuel filters. We try and use a lot of local resources too, but sometimes when we need electrical components, we'll have to go online. Got
it. And while we're talking about these parts, a viewer of Office Hours actually asked the question, wondering whether you could answer it. Like, as an engineer, you talk about the different parts. Do engineers actually build the trains? You work on the Orange Line. Are you involved in the building of the Orange Line trains?
So I'm not involved in the building directly, but with the new Orange Line fleet that's being delivered, I'm involved in the testing of the prototype trains and the accepting of the new trains. So it's not necessarily hands-on building, but it's time on the cars with instruments and computer recording equipment and basically taking and reviewing data. But there are engineers from our supplier, the company that builds the trains, and their sub-suppliers, the companies that supply parts to the train manufacturer. And their engineers will work to develop the new parts, test the new parts, and install the new parts. And they'll work with us. But my function really is I'm more there to verify the system as opposed to actually build the system. But in my past job, I was one of those suppliers, and I was actually building the systems. So it gave me a good head start to know how to do all of that, to then step into being able to verify the systems later.
Of course. How long, for the suppliers who are building the systems, how long does it take to build a new train? What is that process like?
If you look at the whole process, we have a lot of restrictions with the train because we're going to use the same tracks, we're going to use the same tunnels, and we're going to use the same power system. We're going to upgrade them, but they're going to generally be the same size and configuration as with the old train. So the first step is to develop a list of requirements called a specification, and that starts maybe 10 years before you'll receive an actual train. So from the start of developing the requirements and then getting companies to submit proposals to build you a train, basically a lot of companies will want to build the train because they all want the contract. So you can go through and get different proposals and kind of pick and choose which is going to be the best train for the amount of money. And then once that happens, the prototype could take anywhere from 2 to 5 years. There's a lot of review that needs to happen beforehand because you want to make sure everything is going to be reliable and safe. And the more you can, with something as big as a train and as complex as a train, you want to be able to review the systems before you actually spend all the money to make it.
So it's definitely it's a long process, and it takes a lot of patience. It sounds as though that's what you're saying.
Yeah, a lot of patience and then a lot of iterations. So you'll have one design or one prototype or one product, and you might need to make the same thing over and over again to make it either better or to make it closer to perfect in the end. So that,
Right.
that can take years.
Got it. Well, it's like anything else, you got to keep trying. You got to keep trying to make everything a little bit better. There's going to be some mistakes along the way, but you just keep doing those iterations, as you said, each time getting it a little bit better, a little bit better. Since we're talking about safety now, this is a question that came in, and I think it's an important question because we are talking with each other during a global pandemic, right? I see that you are in your office, you are at your workplace in the rail yard there. I'm in my basement, I'm not at school. What precautionary and security measures are train systems taking right now with the pandemic?
So right now, since I'm in my office, I don't wear this, but anytime I'll leave my office, I'll wear my mask. And anytime I'm going to go on the train, I'll wear gloves just in case I'm touching something that someone else had touched. Also, I have my alcohol for when I can't wash my hands. I prefer to wash my hands. So there's a lot of just the same things we've been doing in our everyday life for me. But for the train system itself, we have a company come in and they spray, disinfect the train every day. And we have barricades put up on the train to distance passengers from the driver's door so that when the driver gets on and off the train, the passengers can't be anywhere near where the driver is because we want to keep the drivers safe.
That makes a lot of sense. How fast do the trains go at the top speed, the trains that you're working on, these new trains?
So they can go, the trains themselves can go very fast. I know when I was in China testing them, we got up to 63 miles an hour with a fully loaded train. But that's because we had a really long stretch of rail. Here on the Orange Line, the fastest that the trains will get to is 40 miles an hour because they're limited more by the rail and the condition of the rail and the straightness of the rail than they are the actual train itself. It's like your car. Your car could go very fast, but you follow the speed limit of the road. We do the same thing here.
That's good. So you got to be safe and you got to understand the limitations of the environment.
Yeah, and there's actually a system in the tracks it's an electrical system in the tracks that goes up wirelessly to a receiver coil in the front of the train that will tell the train what its allowed speed is. And the train can actually regulate its speed by applying the propulsion system, the motors, and the brakes automatically to make sure that the train does not exceed the speed limit.
Is that like a computer system that the train uses, almost like artificial intelligence?
Somewhat. There's no. It's a little more old school, but yeah, it's definitely a computer. On the new train, especially, it's a computer system, and there's even calculations built in so that if a component on the train or if something were to fail, that system would know and it would slow you down automatically. And in some cases, it would stop you until you took a corrective action, because the system is fail-safe, meaning that if anything were even possible to happen, not saying that it would, but if anything was even possible, it would fail into a safe condition, meaning not moving. Mm-hmm. And it would. The system is designed to basically not let you ever approach a train in front of you.
Got it. So it's safety first. Safety first.
Yeah.
Talking about all this technology and the propulsion and the motors and the gears and the systems that are in place, how did you become an engineer, I guess? Like, how did you get to this point where now you're in that rail yard with the MBTA Orange Line? Like, did you have to learn something in school?
Yeah, I've always kind of worked with computers and with building bikes or small engines or working on a car or something like that. So that helped. But I had to go to college and get the engineering degree, which was it was a lot of work and student loans and all that. But in the end, it can pay off. That was basically the path, was to go to school, and then I got a first job out of school for a company that made equipment monitoring railroad rails. So I started at a low level there, just an entry level position, and with that experience, I was able to interview and join the MBTA.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. Have to go into work at the MBTA to talk to us. Thank you for keeping those trains safe. Before we take off, though, do you have any last words of advice, any kind of words of wisdom to share with the youth of New Bedford, Massachusetts?
Yeah, if you find something you're interested in school, stick with it. Maybe try learning more about it outside of school. Like for me, this fact that I was into something technical outside of school helped me with engineering. If you're into music outside of school or art, I guess just keep pursuing it outside of school while you're doing it in school as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And obviously, you talked about technical interests outside school. I should say that for the record, you and I both know each other for the same reason as another previous Office Hours guest, Benjamin Danian, the artist. We all used to work together, a little over a decade ago. Do you have any fond memories that you'd want to share before we hit?
You should have seen Mr. Green getting filmed for a TV show.
That's right. Yep.
I don't know if you remember this, the Dangerous Jobs TV show, and they took us all out to dinner, and they gave us a little bit of money for being on the show, but he was the star. He was the one they followed around all day.
Yep.
He was he was a pretty good bike rider, so they got to follow him around with a camera and out of the back of a van. It was interesting.
Well, you heard it from Cole Woiszwillo, not from me, but you heard it, so it must be true. Engineer at the MBTA, the Orange Line, thank you so much for joining us today on Office Hours. This is Mr. Green from New Bedford, Massachusetts, wishing all of you a safe weekend, and take care of one another. Peace.